April 13th, and this is the Senate Ag Committee. And we're going to be starting off hearing from Jackie Folsom I guess in regards to maybe a host of issues, but the main one is the issue that we worked on yesterday, trying to figure out a way to make it easier for our new farmers and beginning farmers to find their way through the maze of different organizations and where they can get good positive direction. So good morning, Jackie, and welcome.
Good morning, Senator, and the rest of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this. My name, for the record, Jackie Folsom. I'm the legislative director for the Vermont Farm Bureau. And you asked me to come in and speak about customer services and roadmaps. And sorry I wasn't able to join the crew yesterday, but I did go back and watch the presentation. And I have to say, it's pretty amazing what the state of Vermont, through various organizations, offer to all the farmers in the state. I was listening to Abby Willard mention VHCB, SBA, Sustainable Jobs Fund, RCCP, Farm First. And these are all great, but the one piece that's missing is the coordination. Years ago when Beth Kennett and I were doing agritourism before it was a niche, a real word, I should say, we often talked about having one go-to person that had a manual. This was way before emails and Zooms and all that. You can tell how old I am and how long we've been working on this. Because we'd have people signing up to do agritourism, and they needed to know where to go for a health permit. If they were going to do a restaurant, they needed to know what kind of fencing they needed to put up, what kind of signs, and there was no one in one spot that could answer this. So it was very exciting to hear all these things going on, but they all require you going to one place and then perhaps being referenced to another place, and if that isn't right, to another place. And I just think it would be marvelous if there was, and I think Ellen Kaler talked about this, an ombudsman position somewhere in the state for agriculture that would be a one-stop shop that would kind of connect the dots between all the things that are going on. At Vermont Farm Bureau, we've recently had questions about how to find a lawyer. What is the de minimis rule for water withdrawal, because that's been talked about, and I wasn't even clear of that till Justin Rich told me. How to find an equine vet, how to testify in front of the legislature, what to say, where to find the bills, how to even find you in your rooms. And so when we were listening to Ellen when she presented to the Dairy Task Force, she did mention the ombudsman's position, and I think it was something that they had suggested either in Farm to Plate or in the goals that they had set forward at the Agency of Agriculture. And at the time, I think, Senator Starr, we had listened to the large amount of offerings of technical assistance providers. There were some at UVM, there's some at the Intervale, there's some at at the agency, there's some at VHCB. And we had asked for a list, I think I did in particular, a list of all the technical service providers and who they are, what region they are, and what their specialty is. One of the things we've been hearing from our Farm Bureau members is that they've been referenced to go to technical assistance, a specific technical assistance provider, and that person was not well-rounded in the assistance that they needed. And I think that we discovered that too when you folks voted all that money for the dairy farmers, and we discovered that a lot of them didn't have QuickBooks to use for their farms, didn't know how to access a computer, didn't know where to go and how to complete the forms. The challenge that I heard yesterday, besides the fact that there's no coordination, is that there seems to be a lot of focus on new and beginning farmers, but the questions that we're getting at Farm Bureau are from established farmers. They're not necessarily new and beginning. So I would hold that there are still a lot of questions out in the ag community of farmers of all ages and all generations. And I'm glad that they're helping new and young people coming in. But I think that we also need to remember folks like Will Stevens or Beth Kennett or any of the folks that still might have questions about things that pop up, because everything is changing a lot. I did want to send a shout out to Gina. I've worked with her lately on, I do a lot of reviews for grants, and I've been working with her on the specialty crop grants. And I've discovered this in those grants as well as in the SARE grants that I review, in that farmers don't know how to write grants unless you've done it over and over and over and over again. There are folks like Jasper Hill that are very well versed in how to write grants. But if you get a group of people, a pot of money, and it's open to producer associations or to farmers, there is a huge difference in how those folks understand how to write a grant, as opposed to folks at UVM Extension who do it all the time, or the Agency of Ag who do a lot of grant writing. And I know that they, Abby spoke about, there is a grant writing program at the agency. I wasn't aware of it, and kudos, but it needs to get out there more, because there is a lot of money floating around. There are a lot of opportunities for people to write these grants, but when you read them, as I do, you just go, oh gosh, I wish somebody told them to do this, or I wish they had mentioned that, or are they connected to these people? So as we continue to have funds come in and available to farmers, I think that is really important. And I think that
is VHCB, their READY program, do they help farmers, or just occasionally a farmer will ask for help? Is that more small municipalities, or?
I don't know. I'm not sure that VHCB, I'm not sure whether they assist with grant writing or not. I'm referencing the program that Abby mentioned yesterday, that the agency has a grant writing program, and I didn't know anything about it. So I'm glad they do. But this is another example of, folks call Farm Bureau a lot. I'm sure that they call a lot of different organizations for information, but because there isn't one place to go, it makes it very, very difficult for these folks, because farmers, especially now as the seasons are ramping up, they don't have a lot of time. If they've got a question, they need an answer rather immediately, because it might have something to do with a decision that they're going to make, and trying to, work through the Agency of Agriculture, or even, I don't want to say even worse. I mean, I have a pretty good working relationship with folks at DEC and ANR, but that isn't often the case with farmers, as you well know from testimony that you've heard. And so if there was one person that could bridge those gaps, and not only that, but you have to be able to reference them to the Department of Health if they're doing something with food. There's just a lot of little things that farmers need help with, and some big things too, but there doesn't seem to be one resource as far as that. And my husband just sent me a note, and also about reminding farmers to use QuickBooks for Schedule F, so that they have an easier time doing taxes. I mean, some of these things just haven't happened, and you've seen the results of that as we've tried to distribute money that's come in, that there's just a lot of folks who don't have this expertise, don't know where to get it. And when the opportunity comes for this kind of money, to apply for money, they don't know how to do it. So I would love to see somewhere in the state of Vermont, someone who can connect the dots and be the one go-to person that would have not a manual so much, or even a roadmap, but just have the references, so that it's much easier for farmers to get an answer quickly. And I'm not saying that when they call these other places, they're not getting it quickly, but just the listing of all the things that the Agency of Ag is already doing, trying to find that one person can sometimes be a challenge.
Well, I know, the testimony we've received is pretty telling that we, we do need a person like this. Um, but I don't know, I'm not sure. Usually, I would think if somebody has an ag question, they would either call the agency of ag or the extension service to start with, one or the other. And if everybody knew where a person was going to be housed, all the different groups, when they got a phone call, they'd say, well, call this number and there's going to be a person answering that phone that could give you direction. It's certainly weird that, we don't have somebody like that already. I mean, and we haven't, I don't know if we ever have had anyone do that.
I don't think we have. I know, as I said, it's been talked about for a long, long time. And as things get more intense and there's more regulation and enforcement coming down, it seems a no-brainer that we would not have someone. And I'm not even sure that this happens in other states, whether there are these kind of people embedded in agencies anywhere across the country. But Vermont's a small enough state that if there was one contact person and they knew how to run down answers to these specific questions, it wouldn't be so much the farmer calling in and getting immediately sent somewhere else in the hopes that would be the right question. What I almost envision with this person getting the question and then finding the answer and responding to the farmer back directly with the information they need, as opposed to sending them out on a quest of their own, because they just don't have time for it. And there are so many nuances going on anymore that it just seems like an important piece.
As an aside, not to go down a tangent, but that's how Rural Vermont started. Rural Vermont started as a hotline for farmers where they could call if they had different kinds of issues or were looking for stuff. And at the time, we got a lot of calls around property taxes and the need for property tax relief and reappraisals going on and whatnot. And we decided instead of trying to help farmers in crisis, we would try to avoid crisis by changing policy so that they wouldn't run into those problems. But we got a fair amount of calls. There was a variety of calls, and that's how Rural Vermont started. It was called the Farm Advocacy Hotline. And the phone would ring in Montpelier and we'd help them solve their problems, depending on what they needed. Anyway, it's just an aside.
And that worked good. I mean, we had a lot of calls.
Yeah, we did. A lot of them were problems. They weren't the kind of calls that we're envisioning happening here, where people want to know more about getting a grant or how to build a greenhouse or something. These were calls from people who are having trouble paying their electric bills. This was during the so-called farm crisis, as you remember.
Which
we were
one?
Really worried about the farms. Yeah, right, exactly. Anyway, it's just an aside that Rural Vermont started as a hotline phone number for farmers.
Well, and I think you could have this person just, to segue onto that, Senator, if someone was having a challenge paying an electric bill, the first person that could be suggested is Matt Strasberg at the mediation organization over there. And they may not know that, and so that it would still be that kind of a hotline or a problem solving or a reference, but those things are still needed, I think, because, we go in and out of farm crises.
Right. Now it's just become a way of life. It's not a crisis anymore. It's just the way it is.
Sadly.
We had the phone line was mostly managed by paralegals, people who at the time were coming out of Woodbury College, which was the paralegal school in Montpelier at the time. So we had these young people who were trying to be paralegals who answered the phone most of the time.
Should we have Anson in or somebody to talk about such a position? Or
Yeah, I'm all for it. I don't know whether I would be supportive of creating a new position to do this. I would hope that we already have someone in place that could, instead of doing what they're doing now, sort of transition over to doing this other thing. But I think you raise a good point, Jackie. And so were our guest yesterday, you know, there's gotta be a way to do it. There's gotta be a way for us to be able to centrally locate someone. And I don't know, should it be at the agency or the extension service or somewhere else? I don't know, but yeah, I think that's a good idea, Mr. Chair. At least Anson would have the ability to kind of take that 30,000-foot view and say, here's how I could see this happening.
Well, at least, did you have a special number, Anthony? Like,
Yes, it was, yeah, I forget what it was, but it was a special number set aside just for those calls.
And how did you get the word out?
I don't remember. It was things in history.
Okay,
We just publicized it in various ways. But there was a lot of bad stuff was going on at the time, and like we got a lot of calls from farmers who saw seeing their property taxes skyrocket while other taxes had gone down, other commercial properties had gone down. So we started saying to people, all right, this happened to you, it probably happened to your neighbors as well. And they'd say, yeah, it happened to all of us farmers up here. So we said, why don't you get a group of your friends together and come up and talk to you as a group? And we basically helped them. We helped them appeal their property tax appraisals, and we were successful in rolling back the appraisals at the time. So then we decided to take it and show on the road, and we got a call from a farmer in St. Albans, Frank Montaigne, and he said, it's happening to everybody up here. So we said, can you get some farmers together? And he said, sure. We went up to St. Albans town, and every farmer in town was there, and there were like 35 of them at the time.
Really?
So and we decided to take it down to Montpelier to try to change the policy. So it went from being crisis to policy change, but
we filled the House chamber a few
Yeah.
times.
yeah, we did.
Yeah, that was a wild time. Dump milk on the State House lawn.
Yeah,
Uh,
Yep.
Had manure trucks out there in a parade.
yeah. We had a tractor cade come through Montpelier.
Yeah, tractors.
And we asked for hearings for this. We asked for an ad hoc committee to hold hearings in the State House on property taxes. And they said they couldn't do it. They didn't have time to do it. So we said, okay, the farmers are going to hold a hearing and we're going to invite you to come and listen to us. And so right away that Peter Welch and Brian Prentice Horrigan and a number of others decided they would hold hearings and let farmers come and testify, because otherwise the farmers were going to hold hearings and invite the legislators to come listen to them. So
Yeah.
it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, we had Leahy and
Yeah.
Jim Jeffords and who the hell was, I guess Bernie was the rep back then.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had some real hearings. Well, we'll invite Anson over and have a chat with him to see about, if he's got somebody that could look into that, or if they're, we're gonna have Gus in, I think later today or tomorrow, and we could ask him how he's doing with people. We got Gus coming tomorrow. So we could ask him if he has anyone in the READY program that could take this on. And I think the big issue is to get it published. If we can get to that, then get it publicized so that everybody knows if you call this 1-800 number, you'll get somebody on the other end that can direct you in a positive way on many different issues.
I
Yeah,
think that'd be helpful, and they could do it in AgriView. That's electronic. It goes out to a lot of folks. And it also still goes out on paper issue too. So it would be a step forward, I think, given how many things are changing at the State House and how many things folks need to keep up on, but also just, Farm First was put into place because of another farm crisis where we had heard of suicides of farmers in New York in particular at one point. And that was started for dairy farmers, and now it's available to any farmer in the state. And that's been a good thing. And I think they've been really helpful. We always promoted them at the farm show, I know, and in various other places. But it's just, there are a lot of resources for farmers that were mentioned yesterday that I don't think are widely known out there in the community, both, as I said, for beginning farmers and for those who've been around for a while. And at times, everybody needs help. I just think it would be the right thing to do.
Yeah. Did you have anything else, Jackie? You have the one person that might be able to testify on the surface water bill 466.
Yeah, I'll send Linda the Justin Rich. You had him in before, I think, and he's willing to come back in and talk about his concerns with the amendment that was proposed yesterday in Senate Natural Resources. And Ryan Patch also spoke against the amendment. It just seems, you know, I think the purpose of this bill, we're kind of skirting around it. They want to get a database, but of course, going forward, it's also to require permitting and perhaps, I don't want to say paying for the water. Senator Campion made a comment yesterday to Justin after Justin had said how much water he withdraws. And Justin's challenge is that, and I'll let him say it better, but what I've heard him say is that they're not considering the withdrawals from large withdrawals from small watersheds or small withdrawals from large watersheds, which can make a difference. It's just a carte blanche. This is what we need to have you report wherever you take it out. And Justin is very, very good in explaining why he thinks that that may or may not be a good idea. The other thing that the committee yesterday questioned, although I think it was on their website, was what do surrounding states have as their minimums? And it's quite all over the board. And Michael O'Grady was going to come back with that information. That was the point. At that point, Senator Bray said, well, let's wait till we get that information, although it's already been said. So they're coming back to talk about that and determine if maybe what they're expecting is too low or not low enough or too high. And then they are going to talk about the amendment. So
I know a few years ago, I was in California and they have brooks. I mean, they draw this water down off the mountains and go in a reservoir near the farm. And they have, I mean, pipes, 10, 15-inch pipes that bring that water, and they open it and it runs, you know, it runs along a big ditch. And then it runs into small ditches that run down through by the rows of crops. And I mean, it's a huge amount of water they use. And I don't know, maybe we're wasting water, but I haven't heard of a big problem with our rainfall and our rivers all drying up.
well, I know they mentioned several times that just last year it was reported there was, I think, the drought in the Northwest, and it was really wet down south. But a lot of this, from listening to the conversations in that committee, it's kind of like listening to people who don't understand how farmers do fertilizer or manure spreading. They see it just going out on the fields and they think it's, you know, there's nobody watching it and there's no parameters and there's no rules. And I think that's what's happening when they talk about, when the vegetable growers talk about irrigating. Sometimes people think, oh, they've got a hose and it's just spraying all over and they're using tons and tons of water. And we always have to remind people that farmers are stewards of the land and the water, and they don't abuse it. They don't take out more than they need. It goes back into the rivers and the streams. And I think there's a misconception that we're just drawing water out just to throw it on the land and over water. And that's not what's happening if you listen to the vegetable growers.
Yeah.
So that's a concern.
Yeah, any other questions for Jackie?
No, I'm gonna try to find that amendment. I just went on their webpage and I don't see the amendment there, so I don't know what the amendment was about.
So it's Senator Collmore, it's listed as draft 3-1.
Okay. I did
Draft
see
number
that.
3-1 of H 466. So that's the amendments that they're gonna, that they
Well,
are.
they had it down, I read something about 500 gallons a day for 30 days or 150,000 gallons a month. So yeah, it'd be 5,000 a day times with the 30 days be 100. Well, I don't know, what if one day you needed 8,000 gallons and the next none? Is it averaged out over the 30 days or not? And
That's one of Justin's questions, is what equals the 30 days. The other thing that has come up is the withdrawals for irrigation or watering of livestock, and they mentioned the gallons. But they put down based on log records pursuant to a technically appropriate method approved by the Secretary of A&R. So my question is, what is a technically appropriate method? Is it different for each farm? Is there just one way that they want? And I know that's going to be done through rulemaking, but that kind of leaves it wide open. If the Secretary of Agency of Natural Resources can say, okay, you do it this way, or you do it this way, or you do it this way, that is going to be a real challenge for farmers to try to figure that out. So that was something that I flagged to make sure that you folks were aware of. What is a technically appropriate method? When is it going to be determined? How is it going to be determined? And is it going to be per farm, or, you know, this is how you're all going to do it after they've listened, hopefully listened to the farmers. This also requests a pre-rulemaking public input and outreach with interested parties. So I'm thinking that this is how they're hoping to get the farmers more involved. But of course, you know, this is going to be July and August. It's almost impossible to get farmers involved in public hearings for rulemaking on something that's going to drastically affect them, and then go into rulemaking and say, well, you know, the farmers didn't come out, or we only heard from 2. I mean, this is a real challenge, this whole thing. So anyhow, that's the amendment. Did you find it, Senator Collmore?
I did. I'm reading it now.
Yep. So
that's
that's what they're doing now.
did it say anything in the bill about when, see, if we had that in September, October, after the harvest season, the public hearings, not let them do it until after the harvest season, then they might get people to attend and participate.
There's nothing that's in section 4A, and it doesn't say when that the pre-rulemaking discussion takes place. So that might be something that you all could put in as a date if you do get the bill, but it is a challenge.
Yeah, the language says any 30-day period. So it doesn't separate any months out or parts of the year.
Yeah. And it does now go up to $1.5 million over any 30-day period, but
Right.
How many days?
30.
30 over
Before-
any. So that, you know, the question is, if you're trying to figure out when to, you know, if you're trying to figure out when to list a 30-day, how do you figure out which 30-day it is, or which 24? I mean, it's not very transparent.
But I thought if you took that many gallons, you had to have it registered or a permit, 1.5 million.
It shall provide an estimate of total volume withdrawn or provide meter data. I don't think this is permitting yet. I think that's where it's headed.
So registration,
Yeah, because they'll have, as soon as you report, they'll know who you are.
You're on the record.
Right. And then the next step would be permitting, and the next step, who knows?
Well, I think we'll plan to have Michael go through the bill. I mean, he's the one that's writing this, and he can, when he goes through it, he can explain the different parts. And what, what the thinking was behind it when he put it together. Any other questions for Jackie?
No.
No? Well, thank you very much, Jackie, and, we'll maybe see you tomorrow if you have time.
Great. Linda, do you have Justin Rich's contact? I think he's Justin at Burnt Rock Farm. Yeah, okay. I'll let him know. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure as always.
Yeah, very good.
See you later.
So we have Carrie coming back on that 626.
Yep.
And Morgan, are you Morgan?
I am Morgan, nice to meet you
Yeah.
guys.
Would you like to go now?
I
What?
can, you want me to just text Carrie and tell him to come on?
Yeah,
He's probably gonna sign in, virtually, but yeah, I can go now if you guys are ready.
yeah. Or were you planning on talking after Carrie?
No, I can go before, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, we can get him on and keep
Yeah.
right on our rolling.
And then I do have some slides to share. Do you want me to sign into the Zoom or do you want? Okay.
Yeah, if you could do that, I'll
Yeah.
give you a couple. Here's Carrie.
Is it okay to sit here, or?
Yep.
So
you work with Carrie?
Yeah,
in
so
that
I just
division?
started in August, in Carrie's group, as kind of a research and policy specialist. So I've been digging through data basically ever since. So just trying to, kind of make sense of a lot of data they've been collecting for
Yeah,
years now. So, it's been great. It's been a really awesome opportunity.
and have you met committee members?
I have not
No,
officially.
well, there's 4 of us here and Senator Pearson's on the screen. And you wanna introduce yourself? We'll run around the table, Chris.
Good morning, Chris Pearson from Chittenden.
Brian Collmore from the Rutland District.
I'm Anthony Hilliard from Washington County.
Corey Parent from Franklin County.
And I'm Bobby Starr from Essex Orleans.
Nice to meet all of you.
And so welcome and nice to have you with us. And we've been taking testimony on our pollinators and the issues that the folks are having with their pollinators and trying to figure out a way to help them as well as, making sure we grow crops and feed the animals. So it's a pretty important, our pollinators are very important to us, and then we want to do the best we can to protect them. It hasn't been good the last few years, so good to have you with us.
Well, thank you. That looks very fine for you. All right. So the data that I have to share today is basically the last 5 years from a surface water pesticide monitoring program. We monitor for other analytes, but today I'm just going to talk about the neonics that we are looking for. So basically, we picked our sites so that they're located in high agricultural use areas of the state. So we're kind of leaning towards that bias instead of an overall representation of surface waters from the state. We're leaning towards, we want to know what's happening in those high ag use areas. So most of the sites, we just kind of organize them here as geographically for you. And most of the sites, they're routinely sampled throughout the year at critical times of the growing season. So like right around now, the first sample is taken, so after thaw but before plant. And then 2 samples are taken in both June and July, 2 weeks apart. And then 1 sample each in August, September, October. So it kind of gives us that range of the growing season. Kind of gives you an idea of when pesticides are heavily used and not. So some of the sites here are only collected after rainfall events. So they're monitored for flow, and when you see a significant increase in flow, then they'll go out and sample all of those specific rainfall event sites. But most of the sites are just on that routine schedule. So we analyzed our samples for 3 neonicotinoids that are kind of the most commonly used ones in Vermont. Are you having people hear me? I can take this off. Is that better?
That's a lot.
So they, so the 3 common ones are clothianidin, imidacloprid, and thiamethoxam. And then our samples are all processed and analyzed at the Vermont Agricultural and Environmental Lab in Randolph with internally developed methods.
So like all those streams that rivers you have up there, they've all been tested?
Yep. So from 2017 through 21, and then all of those times throughout that growing season. Yeah. So the only caveats are the ones with the A subscript. So those are the ones that are that rainfall event. So they're only sampled after rainfall events. So it's basically another site at Jewett Brook, and then a couple in Quebec, St. Albans. So it's just a handful are those rainfall event ones.
Yeah.
But it's just.
So what's the AB?
That one is both. It's sampled routinely for those growing season event sites, but also it's sampled after rainfall events as well.
And you're gonna come to the results of those eventually?
Yes.
Yeah.
But our results, to kind of frame our results, we need to compare it to something. What do those numbers mean that we find, right? So what we compare it to is the EPA aquatic life benchmarks. So these are based on toxicity values in research studies that are reviewed by the EPA, and then they use those studies and these benchmarks in their risk assessments when they're looking to make registration decisions about pesticides. So basically these benchmarks are really conservative values. And so they're obviously, EPA is always conservative, and they're really leaning towards conservative values. So these concentrations, below these concentrations, it's not expected that the pesticide is going to be a risk to aquatic life, basically. So this is that threshold, even though it's a conservative threshold. So the 2 main thresholds that we're going to be comparing to are in the invertebrate columns. So invertebrates are, and especially a chronic exposure, so over time exposure instead of an acute one-time exposure. So those numbers are going to be the lowest numbers in the benchmark values. So we're trying to be conservative to say, okay, we're finding low values, let's compare it to the most conservative threshold that we can. So to kind of, that first row is clothianidin, for example. So in these toxicity studies, they are testing it with a representative species. So it's a sensitive midge species of an invertebrate. And they are finding at 0.05 parts per billion over a 40-day period, no observable adverse effects are seen. So that's that NOAEC number. Okay, so that one column, NOAEC, that stands for no observable adverse effect concentration. But from those same studies, so for that same study for clothianidin, they also find the lowest concentration at which adverse effects are seen. So there's a difference there. So the difference between that 3.4 and 0.05, that's a pretty big range in between there. But so the difference is at 0.05, they didn't see any adverse effects. But 3.4 is the lowest concentration where they saw adverse effects. So practically,
That's 2.9 to the good.
right. So practically, field studies, we could always just compare to this LOAC number, because that's saying like, okay, below that, you shouldn't really see adverse effects, right? Because that's the lowest concentration that they saw adverse effects. For our data, we will show you both against the NOAC and LOAC, just to be more conservative. And then also, so just for the imidacloprid and the thiamethoxam, so it's not as big of a difference between that NOAC and LOAC number. So it's basically just a 3 times difference instead of 68 times more, basically, for that LOAC number. So I know this is confusing, but it helps us to frame what we find then.
No, you're explaining with my thick head, if I understand it.
All right, well, just, yeah, stop me at any
The
time.
kid here ought to be doing really
Still doesn't make sense.
pay attention. Paying attention, okay.
So basically, when we are comparing to those benchmarks, it really gives us an idea of identifying and prioritizing if we have a problem place, right? So if we're consistently seeing values that are above those chronic benchmark values, then we know, okay, we should look into this further. So we should do further testing. We should see, is the greater environment and greater biota populations being affected? So now here are our results. So over the last 5 years, so this is just clothianidin. So these are just the numbers of detections of clothianidin. So this one gets a little more confusing because every detection that you see is showing at or above that benchmark, that NOAC benchmark. And that's because our lab's reporting limit is equal to that NOAC number. So basically our lab can only find a level equal to 0.05 ppb. That's the lowest level that we can find that we can test for accurately. So that's why we say every detection is at that benchmark. But that's when the LOAC comes into play. So none of them are above that LOAC 3.4 number. So we can see that we do have the majority of the detections are in Franklin County, mostly in Jewett Brook, Hungerford Brook. And you can see that the majority of them are in that middle of the growing season. So that June date, a few Octobers in there as well. But also we can see that from over the last 5 years, we've seen a decline in detections. So just this past year, we've only seen 1 detection, and it's also in Addison County.
And that's out of 143 samples. Is that the number of samples?
Yep.
But you only had 1 detection?
Yep, of clothianidin. Yep, so 143 samples for that 1 year we're taking. Yep.
And so the percentages have got to be very, very low.
Yes, right. So there's a reason why I showed it as number of detections instead of percentages, so we can
Wow.
kind of see it,
Yeah,
you know, like,
yeah.
yes, we can infer percentages to why I showed samples and number of detections, but
So Franklin County is Jewett Brook, Rock River, Pike River,
Hungerford runs through my lawn.
Hanford is down there too.
Hanford, I don't think it's.
Mill River, where's Mill River?
Mill River's
that
more
Rutland?
towards Georgia.
Oh,
Yes.
'cause we have a
Salem
Mill
sounds
River
like
in
a lot.
Rutland County too.
Yeah,
It's
so
a
all of
brewery.
the ones except, the one for 21, that little Otter Creek, that's in Addison County, but all the other ones are in Franklin County.
And you did do sampling like Otter Creek and all those, and they didn't make the list?
Correct, right, because they were in non-detects, so we didn't find any clothianid in those, previous years.
But our, our big guy that was on for about an hour with us, he was from Addison, yeah, Middlebury.
Yeah,
And, I mean, he lost tremendous amount, half his beefs, he said.
Yeah, I think, all I can speak to is the data that we find in surface water now, and it is hard to make those correlations without directly,
Being a
Design.
bee, huh?
right, so, I am gonna talk about a little bit about our bee monitoring
Yeah,
as well,
go
data,
ahead.
so, we can get a little bit more into that. But moving on to the second active ingredient, this is imidacloprid. So, as you can see, we have very few detections of imidacloprid over the last 5 years in our surface water, but both were in Jewett Brook. And however, imidacloprid also has the caveat that our reporting limit for the lab is again 0.05 ppb.
See, if you were working for me, I'd probably private, I'd tell you not to test.
Because we're above the benchmarks. So what we're doing is we're actively working with our lab to try and lower that reporting limit. And so part of it, there's a difference between a detection limit and a reporting limit. So they might be able to find it at lower concentrations, but because of their quality assurance tests to make sure that one result way down here is accurate, they can't do it with enough confidence, and so it bumps up that reporting limit. So it might just be kind of working more on those quality assurance tests
Alright.
to give them more confidence.
Any one of those three products more dangerous to bees than others, or?
I think so. We've the EPA released recently the draft biological evaluations on all three of these, and they're basically all up there with toxicity to
Bad.
bees. Yeah, there really isn't even a lesser of the three evils. They're both. I mean, they're
All three are, and is that the only three that are on these treated seeds that would kill bees?
Oh, I consider Christian has things. So I think, so Carrie was mentioning yesterday, these are the three that are most commonly on treated seeds. But again, we don't collect that data. That's a gap in our reporting that we know now for treated seeds, is we don't know what's being used and at what rate, planting rate here in Vermont.
See, that's the other issue that we want to find out more about, is the amount of these items that are on each individual seed, because we've heard testimony that we don't need that much on our seeds, and are we over treating that could be causing trouble? But we don't.
Unfortunately, right? It's a
Do
big
you
gap.
know?
I do not know.
You don't.
Hopefully we can get a better idea of what our growers are buying and planting, if we can up our requirements for reporting. But right now, we don't.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Morgan, do you have, one of the dynamics that beekeepers talk about is the cumulative effect and how it accumulates in hives and thought to, see higher levels in hives based on the repeated nature of, we're using treated seeds after all, year after year, and there's a lot of remnants that stays in the soil. Do you have any sense of that? I mean, what I'm wondering is, are you the right person to ask about cumulative data over time? It doesn't stretch my imagination to imagine that, for a tiny organism like a bee, that seeing it accumulate in hives where it might strengthen would have a bigger impact. So I don't know if you're the right person to ask, but I figured I would try.
Yes, I am not necessarily the right person to ask for bee data specifically. I am going to present some here today, but Brooke Decker is our culinary health specialist, and so she will know for sure. But to get at your cumulative effects, that's one of the reasons why I'm putting this date of detection on these charts here, and that's to show that we're still testing. So Hungerford Brook, say, or in 2018, right? So it was found in June. So this is thiamethoxam, but we still tested that brook and sampled a second time in June, 2 times in July, and then once in August, September, and October. And that means it wasn't found in those subsequent dates in that year. So
you could track it.
right. So we are sampling routinely throughout the year, but the reason why I'm trying to, show is that, but we're not consistently finding it every time we sample throughout the year. So we're not really seeing that accumulative effect. We're getting a spike hit, but then we're not finding it for the rest of the growing season. So, and that's also a reason why we're comparing to the chronic numbers instead of acute. The acute benchmarks are significantly higher than chronic, but that is exactly what you're getting at, Senator Pearson, is that yes, these insects are so sensitive to a little amount if it's there all the time, but our data just doesn't support right now finding it all the time consistently.
Yeah, because it's down to 0. Yeah.
Right. So again, so with thiamethoxam, we're seeing that same decline over the last 5 years that we saw with our clothianidin detections. So we didn't find any this past year. And again, the ones we have found in the past are concentrated in Franklin County. One little article hit in there.
I'm wondering, you don't have any records from before 17?
We do. So some of them are, I think we go back to 2012.
12.
But with more spotty testing for annelids. So the last 5 years is when we consistently tested for all 3 of these chemicals.
See, what I'm wondering is back 10, 15 years ago, treated seeds, 15 years ago, they were just creeping in. And maybe 10 years ago, they were used maybe 50-50. And I'm wondering, out loud, which is dangerous, is that the old way of doing it worse than the new way that we're doing it? Because our numbers here look pretty good. And it would be interesting to know the old-fashioned way or the old method of planting corn, because I think I would expect, I know, that we're growing more corn today than we did 15 years ago. And the numbers now look, look pretty good up there. Is there any way you could research that for us?
I can look into it, yeah, so prior to anything we have, prior to 2017, yes, I can, and
See
kind of,
what those numbers look like. There's something causing those bees to drop dead on us. And so the big thing is to find what's doing.
yep, yeah, that's the $1 million
Oh,
question,
and-
right? Yeah. So we did want to kind of just frame our results a little bit. So we're giving you reference. So in these last 5 years, we have just the usage data for these 3 neonics. You can see that comparatively, imidacloprid is higher in usage. This is applications. This doesn't capture treated seeds. So our usage data does not capture treated seeds. We recognize that that is a gap right now. And the highest usage category for that imidacloprid is mostly lawn care and golf courses. So we have that comparatively high usage, but it's not being recorded as usage in corn and field and forage and things like that. And then also, we recognize this is the data we do have for seed sales. Can you see that second column?
No, Senator Pearson's in the way.
Is untreated, so it's treated,
Pearson, get out of the way.
treated and then untreated
Okay.
is that second column. But these treated sales includes everything. So it's treated with neonics, but it's treated, anything treated with other pesticides or any seeds treated with growth enhancers or things like that. So it's not delineated.
Well, corn and soybean are the 2 big issues. And so it's 848 tons of treated and must be 68 tons of untreated.
Yes, yeah, so that's
So-
just sales, yeah.
The untreated, I would presume, are going to organic farmers that cannot use treated seeds. And
I
then
would think the same.
some may be going to regular farms, but, percentage wise, compared to our 28 or 30 organic farms to, our conventional farms, those numbers would run somewhere like that. But soybeans, it's 150 ton of, that's seed, right?
Yeah, seed, yeah.
That's a lot of tons of corn or soybeans.
Yes, I think,
But see, now the soybeans way up to 222 untreated. That's a weird, I don't know about figuring that one out. Why that one's so much untreated soybean seed is high. A lot more tons.
right, I don't know, I'm with you as into wondering, definitely, we can ask around and Carrie, if Carrie knows more about it, he can chime in.
No, he would tell us that we gotta talk to you. Now that, is very interesting. That,
Yeah, so basically it highlights, the kind of second bullet point there for our next steps is we really recognize that we have a gap in knowledge of what are we using, what's in the state, that could be used in us trying to figure out this problem. So we have these monitoring results, but, and we have application results, but there's a gap in that treated seed. usage.
Do you have any, any way of comparing what we use, like for seeds compared to a neighboring like New York State or Mass or Connecticut?
I can look into it. I'm sure, I don't know if they have the same gap as far as treated seed usage data. I don't know. But I can definitely look into it.
See, my question to the bee guy that we had on was, well, if we're doing all this corn and you're losing 50–60% of your bees, what's happening in our neighboring states? Because they have a lot less farms than we have. So what's happening there to try to figure out if what the heck's wrong here? If we're losing all those bees, they must be using the same technology. If they are they losing half of their bees? And we need to have some better data on that. Go ahead.
Sure, oh, no problem. And I just wanted to highlight that we do recognize that just because the majority of our detections are coming in that Jewett Brook area. So the Watershed Management Division of ANR had planned to do kind of a more in-depth expanded biota testing at Jewett Brook this past fall, but it got postponed a year just because the water levels were too low. So that will really help us kind of do a deeper dive into that one area where we do see those occasional
That
detections.
Jewett Brook causes all kinds of, I think we should dam that up and pump it to Canada.
Well, it's also where the city of St. Albans puts their sewage in there.
You drink that Jewett Brook water?
No. That's the problem with St. Albans Bay. Jewett Brook runs right in, and St. Albans, and the lake flows north, so it all gets trapped in that corner of St. Albans Bay. So you have sewage from the city of St. Albans, even prior to sewage treatment plants. All that, and we also built a causeway across it. It's a swamp, 100 years ago, we built a causeway, so it all gets jammed up in that corner. Flow this way, nowhere to escape, and that's where everything settles. That's the worst corner of St. Albans
So
Bay.
you've had algae in the lake forever?
Oh, since I was a kid, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I mean, I've only been around 31 years, but I don't remember a summer without green stuff in that corner.
Should have a skimmer or something.
They used to dredge it and actually help, but you're not allowed to dredge anymore.
That's what it needs, but that's against the rules,
It's
right?
against the
You
rules.
can't.
Well, it's interesting because where Jewett comes out to, that Bay Park there was built by the CCC in the Great Depression. They actually were gonna dredge that whole area out. It's a swamp now. I've seen the blueprints. They were gonna turn it into a lagoon with walking paths and all that to the swamp. Obviously, you could never do that now, but
Those
they only
smart-
built about half the plan.
Those smart people haven't figured out that if you fill in your brooks and your lake with dirt in the bottom that's full of crap, and it goes from being this 4 feet deep to 1 feet deep, 1 foot deep, the sun's gonna heat that water up a heck of a lot faster, and algae are gonna grow a lot quicker in warm water than they are in cold water. But they haven't quite got to that yet. They haven't figured that one out. David Dean and that other guy upstairs, the other smart person that ran natural resources for years.
Tony Klein,
Yeah, Klein, was it
Tony,
Tony? Yeah, he figured it out. Yeah, did well by us. Now he's probably gone back to New York City driving a taxi where he came from. But anyways, let's get going.
Sure, so we also just wanted to talk through some monitoring data that we have for our Vermont honeybees. So we have a snapshot here from the National Honeybee Survey. And so we just picked just 2 beekeepers right now, just to show you kind of just a glimpse. Otherwise, the data becomes a little too overwhelming. So one beekeeper's results will always be on your left, and the second ones will always be on your right. So left is always the same hive through the slides that I show you, and right is the same. So these graphs kind of show you where the specific Vermont sample fall within national averages.
Oh,
So the dotted lines, I know it's small, but the dotted lines represent the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile. So just like when you go to the pediatrician and the height and weight charts for your kid, right? So how they're stacking up against the national average. So the first charts here are varroa mite levels. So just within the snapshot, you can tell the left hive is pretty high levels of mites over the 75th percentile for that compared to the national average, whereas on the right, 0 were sampled. So they're obviously significantly lower than the national average for mite levels.
the hours are lower.
Well, this one's sample. So I'm just showing you 2 examples, so 2 hives, so 2 beekeepers, right?
Yep.
So we'll just say the left beekeeper, right beekeeper, right? So the left beekeeper has high mite levels, right beekeeper has low
So
mite
what we're
levels.
referencing are these 2 points here, right?
Exactly. So the red arrow is our sample number, right? And then so it's just kind of tacking it on to national averages. So just like when you bring your 5-year-old to the doctor and,
Yep.
you know, they weigh 40 pounds and okay, well, they're in the, you know, 75th percentile, they're pretty heavy, right? Compared to all other kids.
Yep.
So, then, so we're also looking at Nosema spores. So now this is, you can see the right beekeeper is kind of between that 25th and 50th percentile. The left is below the 25th. So then the next 2 slides just show kind of pathogen levels. So, and really just showing you this as a health assessment, just to give you an idea of the variety that we see. So that it's definitely a spectrum for our Vermont beekeepers of mite levels and then also pathogen levels. So you can expect higher pathogen levels when you have a higher mite load. So we see our left beekeeper has higher pathogen levels because remember, right, they had higher mites. Whereas the right beekeeper, we are kind of below or at that 25th percentile.
Yeah, pretty low.
Yeah, so then this is the same, this is just different pathogens that they're testing. And it kind of just shows you that variety again. So now left, we're kind of, some are over the 50th, some are below the 50th percentile, and then same on the right, we're kind of hovering around that above and below 50th percentile. So basically, just by showing you 2 examples, we just wanted to show you is that we do have a pretty high variance in hive health within the state.
We have good hive health.
I don't know
But the average. or
right,
median
right.
is-
I don't know like compared overall, but
So, and I don't expect you to tell us who the hives are owned by or anything, but are they geographically similar? In other words, if you're gonna sample one way up north and one way south, there are other sort of differences maybe that,
so I don't even know
okay.
between
See,
these
that
2.
would be interesting if the Highlands are coming from up by Pike River and
Right.
Jewett Brook and if that's causing those numbers to be way high. But privately, you might be able to figure that out. You know,
Yeah,
maybe you
Brooke and I
can't
can work together. I don't know. if
tell
Brooke
the
knows
world about it,
Yeah.
but you might be able to personally figure it out.
if there's any correlation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I can show you, so also in this honeybee survey, so there's about 10 hive locations within the state that get surveyed in this honeybee survey. And so every year they test either wax or pollen samples from those hives for 193 pesticides every year. So what I was trying to show here is just, these are the pesticides that are showing at least a trace amount. So at least amount that they can detect with confidence. So
The ones that are not on that list, you can't even detect.
correct, right. So if we're going back to our three, right, our clothianidin, imidacloprid, and thiamethoxam, they're not here. So what we are showing is, so that the red number is the chemical that was found at the highest concentration in each year. So those chemicals, so it's mostly thymol, those are what are used for mite control within the hive. So it's expected to see those at higher levels because those are what beekeepers are using to try and control their mite levels.
Only in 2020, you detected that 2,4-DMPF.
Well, it was seen in so it was seen in 19, 18, 17, and 16. So you see it there at the top. It's just only in 2020, it was the one that was detected at the highest level.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. So before it was lower than the thymol detections
But
in previous.
if the bees are dying in 18 and 19, wasn't detected at a high level in those previous 3 years.
So that 2,4-DMPF is amatraz. So that's what is a common pesticide that's used for mite control. in
To
hives.
kill mites.
Yep.
Are they overusing it? Is that why it showed up?
I don't know of any enforcement actions against overuse. But I can't
Is
say
there-
they are.
Is there such a thing as overuse of that particular product?
I think that, yeah, there will be label rates and they would have to, yes, follow label usage of that and that. So I think that I don't know enough about monitoring, but I do know that I don't know of any enforcement actions against beekeepers for violating the label use of something like that, but that doesn't
No.
mean it doesn't, I
No,
just
I'm
don't know of
just
any.
wondering if that product would kill bees if it was overused.
I don't know, Carrie might have.
Yeah, the answer is that to yes. It's an organophosphate, a broad spectrum insecticide, and it's on a few different bee products, but it's also used in barns. Tactic is a product that they spray barn walls with to kill flies. And it's the same one that gets used in the honey bee hives.
Would that kill bees if it kills flies?
Absolutely. Sort of the dose is the poison. So they're trying to put it in there at a level that kills the mite because the mite is smaller body weight wise. So they're trying to put it in there at a level that kills the mite, but doesn't necessarily kill the bee. But it's more of an art than a science to get it right.
Yeah. Well, if I was a beekeeper and I kept losing my bees, I would want to sanitize the hive so that they wouldn't die. I might push the sprayer one extra shot. And I might be causing my own trouble by overspraying. But anyways.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a question? Just to make sure I'm understanding, Morgan, this table you're showing us, is this the results from 2 hives? Is it
So this
consistent?
one is beyond the 2 hives. So this is over all of the hives that are surveyed in this National Honeybee Survey that's administered through UVM. So this is about 10 beekeepers that are sampled throughout the state.
So 10 apiaries?
Yes.
And how many do we have roughly?
I do not know that
It's like
answer.
it's thousands, though, right? I mean, it's a lot.
Yes,
And,
way more
and
than 10.
I assume the sample would be somehow selected to be helpful, but I guess I would just caution, Mr. Chair, it's a little rich to suggest that beekeepers are responsible for their die-off without any of them being here. I think we would be slow to do that if we were talking about other kinds of farms without our own expertise. So.
I thought I said if I was a beekeeper, I didn't wanna say anything about what our professional beekeepers were doing. I was just saying if I was a beekeeper, I might give it an extra pump on the spray if I was losing all my bees and worried about the points.
The whole conversation, the beekeepers are very clear what they'd like us to do. The whole conversation seems to be centered around they're not right with their analysis, and that's why we're considering not doing that. So I think regardless of a phrase here or there, that is the path that we seem to be on.
Well, we're trying to, I would hope, figure out what's causing the bees to die and a corrective plan to stop that.
Right, and Senator Pearson, I'm very, I hear what you're saying, and I want to reiterate that I'm just presenting monitoring data. So obviously we know this is representative data. Obviously we know there is caveats in reporting limits, again, just like we explained with our surface water. But all I am showing is data from a survey. So I don't want to make any conclusions. I am just presenting.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Morgan. You've been clear about that. Thank you.
And just so I understand, so the 3 pesticides that we've been kind of centering on here, none of them had even a trace in the 10 hives that we're talking about. Is that correct?
That is what the data is showing.
Okay.
Yep, from
That's what I thought you
16
said.
to 20.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yep.
So this is just kind of going in a little bit deeper. So this is from 7 Vermont beekeepers, and this is just the latest data we have for pesticide results. So this is all the chemicals that are listed here are the ones that are at trace or higher. And the ones that are higher, those chemicals are all ones that are in the toolkit for beekeepers for mite control.
Okay.
Again,
So what does that, like beekeeper A,
it's just for to remain
29
anonymous.
of them, is that 29 beekeepers?
Nope, so 29 is parts per billion, so that's a concentration that was found. So that's at Amitraz active ingredient. So it was found in beekeeper A at 29 parts per billion concentration in the sample.
But then it goes to beekeeper E was 240.
Was found at a higher concentration, correct?
But do we know if beekeeper E might have, how many bees they lost compared
Do
to
not,
beekeeper A?
I do not. So this is very much a monitoring survey, right? So it's not kind of trying to make those correlations, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I think we finally just kind of wanted to touch on what we are seeing in the field. And so the last time we presented this to the House committee, Brooke was with us. So I know I'm not doing her justice as far as what she knows, but we did want to call out, and this is a link in here if you come in afterwards. There's a great lit review out of Cornell that we found really informative, and it's comparing results from the studies that are done purely in a lab or semi-field studies. So those research studies compared to ones that are fully in the field, and they're seeing a difference in neonic effects on honeybees between those two types of studies. So it's just something that's really interesting, and it really just nails home to us who are trying to interpret data the best we can, that it's really good to understand the full study in itself and where it was, because it can make a difference as far as the results that you see. So, and then it made a difference whether they were affecting honeybees versus bumblebees. So bumblebees, it was more an agreement between lab studies and field studies. They found the same results, but they're seeing kind of this discrepancy between lab studies and field studies for honeybees. So we just wanted to give you that resource.
So you're doing that this summer
For this summer,
for 22?
right, so we're planning on so the honeybee survey will happen again for UVM this summer, but we're adding in pollen monitoring for pesticides, and that will be run through the agency, and so that will be planned for this summer, correct? So we're trying to get some more data in addition to just that survey, the results that we saw, to try and get more numbers so we can get a
Is there
clearer
a
idea.
certain time during the warmer months that you plan to retrieve this information, or? Do you know
That's a
when
question for Brooke. I do not know whether it will be throughout the season or whether it's during certain, like we were talking about, we know for water, critical periods during the growing season. I assume that it will be throughout, but whether it will be increased sampling at certain critical points of the season, those specifics, I unfortunately can't share. But basically, the long and short of it is that we're really going to continue to follow the data so that we can continue to learn more, and try and see if there's any potential impacts happening within Vermont. But that's it. That's all of our data for right now.
That's the whole load?
Yeah.
You left us in a good fix. Huh? We really know how to solve this. You got it figured out, Jerry?
You all.
That was a good presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for the
Yeah.
opportunity.
A lot of work behind that. So any further questions, or Carrie, do you have anything else to offer? Morgan does a lot better job than you do.
She does. Somebody has to. Only that yesterday, Senator Pearson, when you said, based on the pollinator protection report, nothing's been done. And I did a quick review this morning, and the agency's done all the recommendations in that report that were of consensus, reported as consensus opinion. And I can walk you through those if you'd like, or follow up with an email. There are 3 or 4 non-consensus opinions, and this treated seed is one of those non-consensus opinions. And we have done some of the other things that were non-consensus opinions, sort of like making neonics restricted use. That's been done. So everything that was a consensus opinion has either been done or isn't underway. For instance, we have a category now that's created for commercial applicators to treat in hives. We have added stronger pollinator protection language to the regs, and those are currently going through. They'll be at LCAR in a couple months, but I can either put that in an email or we can walk through it now, whatever you prefer.
Well, you testified about that yesterday, so I mean,
I just wanted to make sure, like I went to pulled up the report and made sure, because we've been fairly diligent in making sure we're ticking off those recommendations. And a lot of the outreach and education pieces are specifically why Brooke was hired. Anecdotally, the two beekeepers you were looking at are both in the Champlain Valley. And just this is my sort of first or second pass over the data. The folks that are using the stronger pesticide, the Amitraz for mite control, are reporting less winter kill. The folks that are using sort of the lighter approaches to mite control are some of the beekeepers that are reporting higher bee kills. And that's sort of data I'm hoping to collect in the future.
So if they do mite control, they're better off than not then.
Everybody does mite control. If you don't do mite control, you're not a beekeeper. You're not going to have bees.
So that example I used where I give it an extra pump, my bees are making it maybe.
No, so if we're looking at the screen with the thymol, oxalic acid, formic acid, we find those in hives, and that's pretty apparent that that's the form of mite control they're using. Not everybody uses that 2,4-D blah blah blah. That's Amitraz. It's an organophosphate that was canceled and brought back just for beekeepers. EPA had canceled all tolerances. Now the only thing with an Amitraz tolerance is honey. They brought that back specifically for beekeepers. And the hives that we see the Amitraz in are from beekeepers who report less winter kill. So I don't know. I would personally like to see somebody study the efficacy of the different mite control options, but that hasn't happened yet.
Is
And
that something that UVM does or could do for you?
They might be able to do it under a specialty crop block grant, but that proposal isn't on the table just yet. I also did want to point out, you saw in Morgan's testimony that we get treated seeds versus non-treated seeds reported. There is language in 626 that sort of clarifies that we want to know what the seeds were treated with and how much. So you did give us authority a couple of years ago to collect data on treated seeds.
So why do we need to do that again?
You don't. We just need to clarify that we want to know what they're treated with, not just the fact that 222 tons of soy wasn't treated and 138 were. We want to know what exactly they were treated with and how much. They're just reporting that they were treated. I want to know if it's clothianidin, imidacloprid, chlorotraniliprole at the 1200, 600, or 250 level.
Yeah, you don't have that authority now with that bill we passed a couple of years ago to collect that?
Correct. This language makes it clear that the language in 626 would make it more specific that we do.
Well, do you or don't you?
So the language that's currently there says report treated seeds, and in statute, that's all it says. We've asked for what they're treated with, but gotten back just that they're treated.
I see.
And Brian?
So would the innovation board be able to do that work?
I believe they would be able to design the study and review that work. We would have to sort of grant it out to probably somebody else to do the work.
So was that a yes?
They could sort of like when VPAC wanted to study something, the advisory council would design the study and the agency would do the work.
Okay.
This
Yeah,
would be
all right.
similar. The ag innovation at the agency at the direction of the ag innovation board would either do the work or grant UVM extension to do the work.
Other questions for Gary or Morgan? No? No? We're running pretty good. You guys, Jared, you, no question?
No, just listening, Mr. Chair.
Huh?
Just listening, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Although, if I recall, I think the bill does have two staffers for Carrie, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
That has what?
Two staffers for Carrie.
2 staff people.
Two staff people?
You can always use the help.
I don't think, they've had to move out of the ag agency because there's no more room over there. They filled the basement, the first floor, second floor, third floor, Bill Burlington, and now aren't you up in Berlin or something, some people? I don't
No,
know.
the Berlin office is closed. That was,
Are you up in Berlin now, Carrie?
what's that?
Where's your office now? Home.
Currently in Northfield, but it's right where it was on the first floor.
Yeah, you ought to see the staffers we've got in that other committee room that I sit in the afternoon. You'd want to have a couple of big buses to load them all in if they got a crew. But anyways, anything else for anybody? No? Well, thank you, Morgan.
Yeah,
Thank you
nice job.
Yeah,
guys,
it
thank
was
you.
Great work. Appreciate you coming over. Thank you, Gary. Anything else from you? You want to cause us any more grief today?
Not today.
Well, don't save it all for tomorrow. Well, thanks a lot, Carrie. You guys are getting a lot of good numbers there, and hopefully we'll get this figured out for our pollinators' sake. And Morgan, are you going to check for other states to see how they're doing with their bees and to see if they're losing a lot of theirs? Or?
Yeah, I can ask around and, yeah, I'll lean on Carrie for some contacts and yeah, we can send a transfer it out.
Yeah.
Margaret Lagus just sent you an email that has a news article about the bees in New Hampshire.
Oh. I send it to us.
She sent it to you.
Yeah. Well, that would be most helpful, Morgan.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again. Yeah. Uh, The, was Michael around at all this one? So we can't get an update on the water control. We'll have to do that tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow, we thought we might be able to do some today, but get an update on that 466 bill. But Michael can't be with us this morning. So that'll be coming up tomorrow. I don't know if anyone had more questions in regards to the pollinator bill, or if you wanted to get other people in, or where you wanted to go with that.
Well, whatever Morgan can provide additionally in terms of, a larger look at the landscape, so to speak, but I'm in favor of sending a letter to the AIB, the Innovation Board, and having them do that and letting this bill just go.
Well, yeah, we've got that other information coming, but that actually, they're going to do studies this summer.
Yep, the agency was, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that, I would hope that they would wait until that information is in. And so this fall, they could, after that info's been collected in the system, they would have additional data to complete their look at this. Chris,
One thing that I'm struggling with is this notion that some people say we have a problem, some people say we don't have a problem. And best management practices, as is entertained here, seems to be being received as if it will be a draconian change, and that doesn't seem to square with the idea that the agency doesn't think there's a problem. I guess I'm not. Doesn't make sense to me that. Why wouldn't we anticipate best management practices written by an agency that doesn't think we have a problem to be quite lax, for lack of a better term? I mean, they don't have to be super onerous. It could even just sort of say, you observe something, and that's and of course they are not law in that sense, they are guidance. So I'm not, I guess there's a disconnect there to from what I'm hearing that I don't understand.
Well, I would hope that they are doing best management practices. Do you don't think they are, or if they are, something is wrong because we're losing these bees? I really believe the beekeepers are having a serious problem keeping their bees alive, and nobody has figured out, even with their testing, that Carrie and Morgan, that's pretty decent facts, I would presume, from listening, but we haven't figured out what the heck's killing the bees. And
well, so what are you asking? I don't believe they're following best management practices for treated seeds because there are none. That's what the bill asks to get set up. So what am I, maybe I don't understand your question.
We gave them permission two or 3 years ago in a bill that they could do what the heck ever they want with treated seeds as far as checking them. And don't worry, that's gonna, if we send a letter over to the agency, that's gonna be in there again, reminding them and maybe even quoting the bill and the law that we passed to do that. I mean,
But they're clearly not, there is no best management practices for treated seeds. That's that. And, you know, one option would be that, so we can send a letter that reminds them of the power that they already have. That's not interesting to me. This bill just sort of tiptoes in the direction. People say it's not enough because it's basically guidance, not a requirement, but you know, to me, that's a very modest step, but not immaterial. So, but there is the question of the bill also, as it's written, is more than just neonic treated seeds. It's more broad than that. And I guess one off-ramp would be to push the agency on BMPs for neonic treated seeds and ask the Ag Innovation Board to look at the rest of that universe, which I don't pretend to understand. I don't know if that would be a further compromise that we could think of. But a letter, you know, to the agency reminding them of the power they have. I mean, I guess it's a nice piece of paper, so it's worth something, but it's not worth much.
Didn't the original, what was the original, the pollinator study committee, whatever it was called, I forget what it was called. Didn't they come up with some recommendations? There were some that were consensus that everybody agreed on. There were some that they voted on. And I thought there were one or two they voted on, which took a pretty strong stand in terms of reducing the use of neonics. But I'm hazy on it. I read it a while ago and I just thought I'd had it on my iPad right away, but I'm not finding it right off. But I just think that, you know, you were given them the opportunity a couple of times to move forward.
yeah.
Maybe we could ask somebody from that group to come and just refresh our minds about that report.
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't it a pollinator protection board that we had and,
Yeah.
and I mean, we fooled with this a lot longer than all the bees in Vermont have lived, I think, combined, because they only last 8-10 days, right?
Or the winter, that, right?
Well,
They're
you
short-lived
can't
except
count
for,
They're just sleeping.
right.
They're
and
working days. No.
So, yeah,
I think.
we have been fooling with this and it's not working. So that's where I think people are sort of asking us to act, and this compromise bill comes from. But maybe we could find somebody from the Pollinator Protection Committee to come help us understand that set of recommendations and the thinking behind it. I mean, it's years ago, but that would be perhaps valuable.
Well, that's why, I forget her name, but the woman who came in from the department last week or so, and we asked her to look at, sort of to go back through the history in a sense of.
Kanika?
Kanika, right? To see how we got here today by looking at what the efforts have been in the past, and we haven't actually got that.
Is she coming back with something?
I don't know.
I don't know. I thought she was gonna come back when Carrie came back, but obviously Carrie brought Morgan instead.
That was the lady from Berlin.
She's on the AID.
Yeah,
I think she's the chair.
Well, she's a staff person.
Okay.
yeah, she.
So, Chris, I don't think anybody here doesn't think there's a problem. I mean, but I think we have to figure out what the problem is and what's causing it. I'm just reading the article that was sent about New Hampshire, they lost 65% of their hives in the winter of 17. And it looks like from what I'm reading here, they are suspecting, it says it's unknown, that a lot of that was from Nosema, which is one of the pesticides that they use to kill the mites. So in other words, I don't think there's necessarily a direct correlation between treated seeds and the kill. I think there's a lot of different things that could be happening, and I'm just suggesting we already have somebody in place that's ready and willing to take this on. And I appreciate your comment about, well, we did it again 5 years ago, but I think a lot's changed. I think the seed companies are doing things differently, and I think a fresh set of eyes would be a great way to kind of go from here. So that's my position, and I know you don't agree, but that's okay.
But you know who doesn't agree with you and who doesn't find it a mystery? It's the beekeepers. They feel that they do.
They're not scientists.
Yeah, they're just beekeepers.
Look, I just am not quick to dismiss what they're saying, and I don't think at the end of this process that this is what I really don't understand. A best management practice around treated seeds does not have to be onerous. It's guidance. It doesn't even have to be followed. It's a very, very minimal step, and there's resistance to it. Fine. I lose political battles in this building all the time, but it's weird to sit here and keep wondering what's going on and who thinks this and that. We know what the beekeepers think. We know what the professionals who are dealing with this is their business. These are not, I think I'm very interested in taking them at their word, and they're not pleased with this bill, right? This is not the bill they wanted. This is a very, very modest step towards what they wanted. And I'm not willing to give up on that.
Well, we can get someone in from the crew that did the report and see what they had to say, but I mean, we've had about everybody over the last 8 or 10 years. I don't think we've missed anybody from coming in to testify in regards to our bee issue. It's just an annual issue that doesn't seem to get better, and we do something every 2 years to fix it up, and it doesn't fix it. And
but we're not following what they're asking us. This is kind of a weird conversation. We have them in every year. We're still having a problem. We don't actually do what they're asking us to do. What?
Well, they want us to ban treated seeds.
Yeah. Maybe that would stop the cycle.
Or at least come up with alternatives.
The science doesn't show that would fix the issue. I mean, God, I don't know how many more smart people we need to get in here to prove that.
Well, on the other hand, though, they've been banned in the European community for a while. Germany decided that there was a big loss of bees that was related to neonics. And so there's smart people in other places that act differently, behave differently. They use the precautionary principle. They say, we're not sure it's safe, so we're not going to allow people to use it.
How are their bees doing?
I don't know.
Their wintertime deaths have increased from 5 to 10% to 25 to 40% over the last few decades. And
in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I have a problem looking at Europe and saying everything they're doing is correct. I mean,
well, no, we kicked their butts out of here a couple 100 years ago, and because they weren't doing things right back then even. So, I mean, you can go over there, take their.
We could
word
just
for
go,
it.
we could just go north where they're in Ontario, the biggest milk producer for Canada. They still have treated seeds, but you have to just do this very modest step to use them. They're seeing less use and they're seeing less die off of their bees. So anyway, look,
Yeah.
maybe we don't need to talk about it anymore. We can take the vote and it seems clear where we'll be. If you'd like, I'm happy to work on an amendment that would further modify this bill to just look at BMPs for neonic treated seeds and then push the rest of the universe to the board, to the Ag Innovation folks. If that's an acceptable step as opposed to a letter, or you can send a letter without my signature. These are all fine options, but I don't think we should sit here and suggest that the people who do this or are involved in this kind of industry don't know what they need or aren't following the science a lot closer than we are quickly on Google. I mean, this is ridiculous. They're very clear what they want. The legislature is unwilling to do it. The House has passed over a very modest step in the direction, but not what they want, but in that direction. If this committee doesn't want to follow it, then fine, send a letter.
Well, I don't see why we would, you could work on an amendment to for the agency to look at the treated seed, but we've already done that, but we could do an amendment to tell them to get their heads out of the sand and look into it and check the products that are, being used on these seeds, that could be less put on the seeds to do the same work.
Well, my amendment would so that the current House bill asks for BMPs on the whole range of treated seeds. And then we've talked about pushing that whole range of discussion back to the Ag Innovation Board. I'm thinking push it back to the Innovation Board, but split out the neonic treated seeds and put them through a BMP. That would be my amendment. But it's only offered as an attempt to bring some comfort to this group. I'm comfortable moving the modest House bill. I don't fully understand why the agency needs two positions to do that, but we could look at that as well, I suppose.
Well, hopefully we'll get a little more information back from the lady that was here last Friday or Thursday and maybe get some more information back from Morgan by the first of the week and get that out of here maybe Wednesday or something like that.
Great. Well, I'll get that language drafted just in case folks are amenable to it.
Yeah, nothing wrong with offering it. And you're home anyways, you may as well be working on it, right?
Yeah, I got nothing to do.
No, you're doing the housework too, or?
Actually,
I have to do that.
We're trying to get Sears on the big screen, so you only get half of the big screen. We'll see.
And I
how
guess,
that works out.
was it you that were telling me my audio is a little delayed?
Yeah.
We were,
Yeah, you
I was-
go after the rest of us.
I would like you all to know where I'm coming from. I was thinking it'd be pretty, when I'm there in person, I'm gonna make sure I vote late just to see if anybody thinks it's funny. What do you think? You guys will know why, okay?
Well,
All right.
when she when he gets to the person before you, vote the same time that person does, and then by the time he gets to you, it'll come in.
Well, it's not on the roll call, it's on the voice vote that we noticed the
Oh,
delay.
yeah, that's true.
Well, when Clarkson was doing it the very first day I was remote, she'd say, all those, she didn't
It did stop.
the question. Yeah, all those in favor, or are you ready to vote? And I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. So, yeah.
Well, you guys, I don't know if there's anything else that we're gonna need to do today. We'll wait until we get that back to move forward with that. So I think if we could get that bill out from down the hall on the,
Surface waters.
yeah. Jared, are you guys holding that up, or who's sitting on that bill, not letting it out so we know what we're looking at?
The committee has been hearing testimony from the farmers. I see that Justin Rich is testifying here tomorrow. He's been in, I believe, 3 times in before Senate Natural as they go through various reworkings of amendments to try to address their concerns. And there were 4 concerns, I believe, that AFM, that Ryan Patch brought forward. One was paying for meters. One was constructed ponds being captured by the program when they shouldn't be. The last one was the third one was a concern with springs. And the last one was the de minimis amount. And it was changed so agricultural users don't have to buy meters, they can just estimate use. Springs were taken out, so those are not included in they're now an exemption. And the language was changed around constructed ponds, so they would not be captured by the program. I'm sure Mr. O'Grady will walk you through all of this. So I think the majority of the farmers' concerns were addressed, but Senate Natural is still fine tuning, for lack of a better word. They're still discussing some of the measures of the bill.
Do you think we'll get it by next week, Friday night, after the morning committees are
I'm not sure when they're taking it up again.
Yeah, we're fine tuning the B bill, Chris. We may get it out or we may not. We're shooting for next Friday night. That's our last day of meeting.
Yeah, I understand.
20 while the bells are going off.
Yeah, because
11:59.
but we're gonna try to go through that hopefully tomorrow. Pete Green wants to testify. I don't know if he's been in down there or
I'm
not.
not sure. I don't think so.
He's a big veggie grower up in Hardwick,
Yes.
that in Craftsbury area.
Screens.
But hopefully they'll have it in pretty good shape, and if they still got the bill and we think there's something that needs to be changed, I guess we could offer an amendment to them, and they could put it in. And he told us last night at our chairs meeting last night, Becca told us that next week, Friday was, the end of morning committees, and I think Chris said he had 5 bills left to get out, so, and more coming.
much.
So anyways.
Focus on 3.
uh,
You should focus on 3 and get those done really well, and
what
5 really
about
bad.
one?
He's also got, the governor's got to try to get through.
But anyway, so we'll try to do that tomorrow, so we'll have an opportunity to discuss, what Michael has to say and go from there.
Okay.
So if there are no other questions, no other issues,